I apologize in advance for the noise that you hear at the bottom, but it is dismissal time for academies. In this video, I'm going to go over some of the logical reasoning and deductive reasoning practice that I want you all to do in order to prepare for your summative. We've been doing work like this throughout, reading the entire novel and some of the questions I've been asking you to think about. And as you read, Pip has been doing logical and deductive reasoning, going back and forth, analyzing the evidence, coming up with theories, crossing out those theories based on logic. And then because she's human, she's been making a lot of errors as well. She's also a teenage girl. She's also connected to almost everyone that involved in this case. And as she learns more and more, she sees how that's going to affect her friendships, especially when we get to the end of the novel. So let's begin. So this is not a very long video, but a short one. Okay. Okay. So that's not what I want you to look at. I want you to look over here. Okay, so in class today, we focused on ad hominem. And just to review, ad hominem is when instead of focusing on the um, argument or the situation itself, you're focusing on attacking the person because you know that people are very relationship based, emotional based. And so if you attack the person, you lose trust in the person. And when we talked about rhetoric and ethos and credibility, once you discredit a person, it's easier for you to believe that they are capable of doing the most heinous, terrible, despicable things. And so you don't even have to provide evidence or proof that a person did X, Y, and Z. You don't have to prove your argument anymore because you have already made them guilty or a monster in the eyes of the public, in the eyes of your heart. Okay? And we talked about how Sal is an example of ad hominem. Stanley, the reporter, used ad hominem when he was writing about Sal, calling him a monster, not using the word allegedly, talking about how people of Indian heritage are don't treat women well. And so using all of that to attack Sal as a person, but not providing any real evidence is how, in the public eye, Sal has been deemed guilty because he never actually went to trial because he died. They didn't investigate his supposed suicide either because he had already been, because of ad hominem, because of bias, because of stereotypes, he had already been attacked as a person for his supposed character. Okay? False dilemma is next. False dilemma is this fallacy in the middle. The book also has a lot of false dilemma. A dilemma is when you're put um, at a crossroads. You think that there's only two options. You have to make a decision, and any decision that you make might hurt you or someone else. False dilemma, though, is when you make it seem like people only have two options when other options exist. For example, in this case, there have been multiple instances when Pippa has interviewed people and she has tried to make them think that this could be true. Maybe Sal is innocent, or maybe Sal did do it, but he didn't kill himself, and they're unable to believe it. They often say, it doesn't matter. Sal's guilty. He killed her, blah, 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 blah. Because no other options were presented to them. The police made them believe Sal killed Andy. and then killed himself because of the guilt. What is the other option? They didn't even present you with another option. Any other theory? Sal is the boyfriend. Sal's fingerprints were in the car. There was a text message sent from Sal's phone. Sal committed suicide in the woods. There was blood on his fingernails. That's the only possible option. Sal killed Andy, then killed himself because of guilt. They didn't even present a second option, just that one option. Sal did it. Okay? False dilemma. You can have one option or two options, not multiple options. But we know from reading the book that there are multiple scenarios that could explain the case. Okay? Another point about false dilemma is tied to the fact that Pippa and Ravi in the book tried to prove if it was possible for Sal to commit the murder in the amount of time that the police suggest. And if we look at the reenactment of this crime, Ravi and Pip are moving fast. They're walking to Andy's house. They're trying to intercept her, all of these things, but they cannot do it in 40 minutes. That's an example of it not being possible for Sal to have done it in a certain way, right? Okay. Circular reasoning. Using the conclusion as part of the reasoning itself. Circular reasoning drives me crazy when I hear it. An example below. You should trust this expert because they are very knowledgeable, and they are knowledgeable because they are a trusted expert. So an example of circular reasoning in this text, we can go back to Stanley. Sal killed himself because he was guilty and sorrowful that he killed Andy. And he killed Andy because he was guilty and sorrowful about what he was eventually going to do anyway, because he's Indian, and Indians don't treat women properly. Another example of circular reasoning in the novel can be tied to, show this. Okay, I needed to find the page number. On page 25 in the book, this is again the interview with Stanley, the reporter, in part 1. In page 25, Stanley says this. Yeah, I kind of remember that, referring to Detective Richard Hawkins. I kind of remember that. Andy left home in her car, and at some point on Salil's walk home, he intercepted her. With either him or her driving, he took her to a secluded place and murdered her. He put her in the trunk and then drove somewhere to hide or dispose of her body. Mind you, well enough that it hasn't been found in 5 years. Must have been a pretty big hole. And then he ditched the car on that road where it was found, Monroe, I think, and he walked home. Pip says, so because of the blood in the trunk, the police believe that Andy was killed somewhere and then hidden in a different location? Yep, says Stanley. Okay. So, how is this an example of circular reasoning? Also, false dilemma. The police do not consider that Salil did not drive her car at all. They do not consider that maybe there was some other way that Andy was carried off. They do not consider that she might not have been buried in the woods. These are all the only thing that they can think of because they saw blood in the trunk. But there could have been many other reasons for there being blood in the trunk. There could have been many more reasons or ways, even if Sal was guilty, for him to take her instead of intercepting her on his walk home. Okay? And then Pip questions that. She says, so because of the blood in the trunk, the police believe that Andy was killed somewhere and then hidden in a different location. Because this happened, this must have happened because this happened. They're not able to get out of this circular loop of their own logic, which is another form of confirmation bias. They think one thing, they have a bit of evidence, and they only use that evidence to go back to their original thought process. Circular reasoning does not allow you to see all the other factors that you need to see in an investigation, which is why you all are doing a mental mind map. That's the next. Okay, so Pip uses logical reasoning. She's deducing based on facts a type of conclusion. She's making conclusions based on facts and going through this logical process. So Pip uses logic to question assumptions, analyze evidence, and challenge official accounts. Consider these moments. Sal's I'm sorry text. That's the evidence. Pip logically thinks, was it truly written by him? It was sent from his phone, but the style of it doesn't match Sal. Why would he confess to doing it? All these other things she's thinking through. Conclusion, this might have been a forced message or fake. Okay? Naomi's alibi. Naomi told Pip that she had left the group and went upstairs to be by herself for a while. But then Max said something else. And then when Pippa asked her again, she said something else and came up with an excuse. So logically, Pip believes that Naomi might be hiding something. Her alibi isn't adding up. And even though the police took their alibi and took the second thing that they said about Sal telling them to lie, et cetera, Pip notices there are inconsistencies. And when there's an inconsistency multiple times, someone's probably lying. Another piece of evidence. The town assumed Sal was guilty. Remember, Sal never went to court because he died. However, in a real investigation, you have to prove the cause of death. There was no body found. Sal's body, the autopsy showed that he had taken several sleeping pills, but they didn't even try and check the muscles in the throat to see if he was forced to take those sleeping pills or what else was he consuming at the time to see if there was malplay at hand. How could he have suffocated himself with that much precision? Because they talked about the bag being very secure over his head. How could he have done that himself? And if he couldn't have done that himself, why didn't they investigate as to see who else could have been there? Did they check the bag for fingerprints? No, they did not. Because they already assumed and believed Sal was guilty. In conclusion, Sal may have been framed for the murder. Too many things didn't add up. As intelligent as Sal was, someone who was about to go to Yale, an Ivy League college, why would he be stupid enough to leave his phone on him, all the blood on his fingertips, and everything else? It doesn't make sense. So, this is my task for you. Read these pages carefully, very, very carefully. And as you read the pages that are assigned to you, I want you to pull out key pieces of evidence and then try and think about what is Pip's logical process as she analyzes this evidence. What conclusions does she come up with? Are those conclusions logical? Is Pip making a fallacy? Is she using an error in reasoning? Is she using ad hominem? Is she using circular reasoning? Is she using false dilemma? Or is there some other error in her logic? Write your conclusion down from Pip. And then you can add an additional comment that says, this is a fallacy, or yeah, this is good reasoning. So again, you can create a chart like this. Key evidence, Pip's logical process, conclusion. Put the evidence and a page number. Put how Pip is analyzing this evidence. What is she doing to make sense of this information? Conclusion. Okay? What conclusion does she come up with? Does Pip come up with? And then on the side, you can also add, is this a fallacy or good logical reasoning? I'm going to check this work and give you feedback on it. And then allow everyone to see all of the examples that you all have put on in your notebooks. Then you will be prepared for that portion of the summative where I'm going to ask you to think about instances in which Pip is trying to do logical reasoning, deductive reasoning. Okay? Ah, it's an error. It says deductive reading. No, it's deductive reasoning. The reasons. Okay. And lastly, what we're doing, just thinking ahead, think about what hinders logic in people. So if you can investigate that, what hinders logic in people? What factors make people unable to be logical in a given moment or at all? And this type of thinking is the type of thinking that you will do on the summative. Alrighty.